Dear Santa, I would really like the Dark Knight McFarlane collection, including the tumbler and Lucius Fox and the Bat Pod with Catwoman. Please, Santa, I've been a good boy, Ah, that's not what you're here for. You want to know what I think about Heretic, you freak? Fine, I'll tell you after this title sequence.
Gut reaction.
Aloha. Welcome back to TheSalawag's Why It's Great Gut Reaction, where I watch things and react from the gut. That's right. My gut's up here. I don't know where yours is. I think that's a personal thing, and let's not really get into it, please. Okay, so the main topic of today is actually the movie Wolf, but Heretic, I did see it, so I'm just going to give you a little spoiler-free review. I'm going to get that out of the way. I know you must be wondering what I'm thinking about Heretic. I know I am. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, the movie Heretic just came out about a week and a half ago at the time of this recording, which means 2 or 3 weeks by the time the video comes out. Heretic stars Hugh Grant, Claire East, and damn it, I forgot to write down the other actress's name. But essentially, it's about 2 religious missionaries. I think they're Mormon. My friend thinks they're Catholic. I'm not really sure what they are. But these 2 young missionaries, about 19 or 20, as stated in the movie, are walking house to house trying to convert people to their church. And they come upon Hugh Grant's house, where he seems like a friendly, grandfather-ish type of character. And he invites them in. They say, hey, we're only allowed to come in if there's a woman present. And he says, sure, my wife's just cooking. She's baking pie right now. And slowly but surely, once they enter his house, although he thrills them with very entertaining concepts and notions about religion, they soon start to realize that the wife is not coming out of the kitchen, and perhaps she doesn't exist at all. One of the many hints and themes of this movie. And this becomes a slow, creepy thriller that's really about Hugh Grant's character's goal of sort of opening the minds of these young missionaries. He has a different idea about religion than they do. And it's a bit of a creeper. It's a bit of a thriller. It's a bit, I wouldn't call it a slow burn. I really found myself enjoying the movie the whole way through. I saw one review where they weren't so happy with the ending of the movie, or they felt whatever it was not quite giving them what they wanted. But as far as I was concerned, I really didn't see the first 2/3 of this movie coming. I thought they were fascinating. We have Hugh Grant pontificating and examining various religions, and it's really, it's engaging. It's really engaging. I like to think of this as like, for you youngins, about 10 or so years ago when Bill Maher was on HBO, he made a documentary called Religiosity, where Bill Maher did the exact same thing, except that it was a documentary. And so it's like that concept was merged a little bit with the movie Split or Midsommar, whichever one you like. But there's this concept of an examination of various religions, sort of citing similarities, differences, and also there's more examinations than that I don't want to spoil because they're so much fun. But essentially, it's like religiosity turned into a sort of thriller movie concept. And there's some death, there's some murder, there's definitely things of intrigue for those of you not interested in the religious conversation. But I would say the religious conversation's the most exciting part of the movie. Not that anything else doesn't work or isn't interesting. It's just, for me, it was so unexpected. I really thought it would be like a 30-minute talk of religion and then about an hour of being scared walking around hallways. And it was literally the opposite. Literally the opposite. But there's still a lot of tension. You're wondering, how are the girls going to get out of this house? And how they keep being sort of led deeper and deeper into the house by Hugh Grant's manipulations. But everything is so well written, and there's such a sharp-witted point to everything. And I'm not a religious person at all. Well, that's not entirely true. I have my own belief system that I'll get into another time. I have my own belief system that works for me, that I have, but I don't subscribe to any traditional religion. Plus, I am Hawaiian, so when I learned that Native Hawaiians worshipped multiple gods, then I was like, okay, well then that's fine with me. Then I'll go on believing whatever I want to believe. But and even that perspective I just shared is kind of a part of the perspective of the movie that's very interesting. It's intriguing, it's engaging. It's like, this movie has snap, crackle, and pop. Really great dialogue that's not... I mean, it's a character. Hugh Grant is such a distinct character. The character writing of each of the characters is fantastic. But again, once we get into the tension, once the girls walk through the two doors, if you've watched the trailer, there is the conundrum of the girls being offered two doors to leave the house. Or in the trailer, it's just offered as two doors, but in the movie, it's two doors to leave the house, except it doesn't seem like they leave the house. One door says belief and one door says disbelief. And that too, huge aspect of what the movie's really trying to talk about. But I really like that the movie, it doesn't tell you what to think as an audience. These girls have their own opinions and have their own attitudes. And it's interesting seeing how they bounce off of Hugh Grant as a character. It got me to the end. I had a really great time watching it. So for those of you who have not seen Heretic, just getting this out of the way, spoiler free, I really enjoyed it. But for those of you who have seen Heretic, okay, for those of you who have seen it, I'm going to do just a mini spoiler because I think it's on my head right now. For those of you who've seen Heretic, for those of you who haven't, spoilers, so just skip to the next 5 or 10 minutes from now and I'll be talking about Wolf, okay? So for those of you who have seen Heretic, I love the exploration of iterations and how... What I like about this movie is that when Hugh Grant makes this entire presentation about religion and he compares it to popular culture, and he talks about the iterations of music, starting with the song The Air That I Breathe, or All That I Need Is the Air That I Breathe. I forgot the name and title of that song and who sings it. But I do love that song. My hard introduction to that song was the end of Seeking a Friend for the End of the World, which is genuinely a fantastic movie. I cannot recommend enough. For those of you who love Steve Carell and Keira Knightley, do go watch Seeking a Friend for the End of the World. It is an awesome movie. But that movie ends with that song, and really... and it moved me so deeply, so that when that was the song of choice for Heretic, when, 30 minutes into this movie, Hugh Grant is playing that, I'm like, oh, that song. And then he's talking about how, well, this is one iteration, and the next iteration is Creep by Radiohead, and the next iteration is from another artist, and each one of these artists sued the other for copyright issues. And then he moves on to the games. And I thought, this is a very well organized, well thought out script. And I say this because, personal reflection, when I was in high school, one of my best teachers, Mr. Herford, he really did his best to try to teach students a method of making it easy to write great essays. And essentially, every teacher kind of had their own way, and every teacher had different examples. But Mr. Herford had this whole kind of schematic of how do you write a good essay. And I don't remember the whole of it, but essentially, you have your introductory paragraph that each sentence establishes a major point you're going to make. And then when you go into your where you go into your main paragraphs for like a 5-paragraph essay, each paragraph focuses on that point and has its own smaller points with examples and analysis. And this is sort of how you lay out your concepts. He said this is not something you're required to do by any measure anywhere, but it's a way to lay out your thoughts in a clear and concise way, so that when you make points in essays, when you want to make a persuasive essay or you want to make an informative essay, you can lay your thoughts out in a very clear way that makes it so that the reader really knows where you're coming from. And that's all he was really trying to teach people, is to have some kind of structure to lay out your thoughts. And I found that same structure was being sort of applied here with these varying discussions between Hugh Grant and the two young women of the film. And what I find interesting is that when he gets to that particular part, before he even gets to that part where the women are creeped out, they're already creeped out. When they're still in the living room, when he's first introduced them, and they haven't realized that the little candle he put on is the blueberry pie that his wife is making. What I love is the first conversation he has, this kind of huge icebreaker where he actually kind of asks a kind of personal question. I forget what it was about exactly. When he first started engaging with them about religion and talking about different religions, you see the Chloe East character, who at first seems like she's the more devout one. You see her kind of have this kind of suggestive look, like she's kind of into Hugh Grant in a kind of messed up kind of way. But I find that interesting because the movie starts off with her and the other girl talking, and the other girl, she talks less, but you see she's so much more observant. You get that total Anya Taylor-Joy from Split vibe from her. She's just screeching. She's just screaming with, I have a little bit more life experience than this person. And so I'm paying attention to the creepiness of Hugh Grant's character. Whereas the more innocent Chloe East character, who, again, this is spoilers, so we don't know yet she's going to be the final girl, but typically that's how it kind of goes. It's kind of Evil Dead worked that way. Ash was the most innocent character who became the only survivor, the final guy. In this case, Chloe East's character, when we are introduced to our two missionary ladies, and they're just sitting outside, about to start their day, you see Chloe East, her character is the one talking about watching porn. She's watching pornography, and it's clearly some kind of amateur thing because she talks about someone banging on the wall next to the guy and girl who are having sex so hard and are making so much noise. And the person banging on the wall says, "We can hear you." And both of them kind of stop and freak out. And the woman just says, "Good." And Chloe East is so affected by this. And I didn't see this coming, that she would end up being the final girl, even though, again, Evil Dead does that. Many movies have it where the most innocent person is the survivor. It's kind of a horror movie trope. But, nonetheless, her innocence and her reaction to this makes it seem like, oh, she's going to be more vulnerable. She's not going to make it to the end of this movie. But also it just made me think sex is on her mind. Things that are adjacent from what she's supposed to be thinking about are on her mind, which I suppose if you are in any religion, they say, of course, temptation is a part of being a person. But in this case, it's so strongly on her mind that she felt the need to bring it up. And then the fact that she seemed kind of attracted to Hugh Grant's character. And then on top of that, at the very end, after everything Hugh Grant put them through, both of them take turns stabbing each other with a weapon that they've been concealing. But Hugh Grant, without question, has had the more fatal, or at least more quickly fatal wound. And it's such an interesting final scene where he's dying. He knows he's dying, and he crawls up to her and just holds her and hugs her and puts his head against her breast, and it both feels kind of pseudo-sexual, but also kind of feels maternal. When Hugh Grant describes his quest for finding the one true religion, you get this inkling that he was so obsessed with this quest that he did not live his life. He didn't find a wife. He didn't find anybody. He found himself so lonely, and with no real answer that satisfied him, until he realized what the real answer was, according to his opinion. But I just thought there was this interesting through line that our more innocent girl, she's actually the one thinking about sex. And she's the one who seems to be intrigued by Hugh Grant. I swear I see that look, and I know it's like you're interested in this old fella, aren't you? But the fact that at the very end that they share this kind of weird sexual tension, but it's also a kind of maternal religious tension as well. It's such a combination of feelings that come out of their final confrontation. And then our other girl comes in, and I did start to doze because the movie was a bit slower at this point, so I missed exactly what happened. But I think Hugh Grant was going to try to give her a final throat slit of his own. But then at the last second, that's when the other girl, who he had sliced earlier, smacks him in the back of the head with the stick with nails in it. So I just thought, wow, okay, that paid off. I guess she came back to life for just a second. So it's just interesting film. Those are the only things I really noticed about the movie, so I'm just throwing that out there. If you guys caught that, if there's anything else that you kind of catch about specifically Claire East and Hugh Grant, because I do feel like a lot was going on between those two that was unsaid. Whereas I feel the other character, maybe the reason she's less memorable, not her fault, because that actress was fantastic, but just because she did seem a bit more familiar as the tougher girl who's most likely going to make it. Just it's a bit more of a familiar character. They're both familiar characters, but just that she was so tough, maybe I felt like she was being more straightforward the whole time anyway. But I really liked the sort of unspoken things happening with Claire East and Hugh Grant. I thought there's some kind of energy being exchanged without words between the two of them that I felt added to the tension of the movie. Whereas even if she was left alive, I would have been terrified for what it actually meant, that she still had this lingering something that was there before the terror started. And I can only imagine what that meant. So that being said, those are my spoiler thoughts on Heretic. I really knocked that one out quick, didn't I? But now I'm going to talk about my main piece of discussion for this episode, which is the movie Wolf, directed by Mike Nichols, starring Jack Nicholson, Michelle Pfeiffer, and James Spader. So tune in. So keep watching for Wolf.
This next song is called Kalpe. And if you're not familiar with the term Kalpe in Hawaiian culture, it's basically something like a werewolf. And my Uncle Robert used to tell us a story about the Kalpe. And we were dumb kids, so we didn't know he was saying Kalpe, and we thought he was saying Cowpig. But it's not about Cowpig, it's about a werewolf. Much scarier, I think.
2,000 pounds.
2,000-pound Cowpig. That could be scary. No, now that I think about it, that would actually be really scary. Yeah. You want to start?
I was really in the mood to watch Wolf. I loved this movie since I was a kid, but I really forgot everything that had happened in it. And what drew me toward watching it again was just a few months ago, I'd rediscovered a sequence from the movie that I remember fondly loving, and I still fondly loved it. But there's a sequence in the movie where, in the movie Wolf, for those who don't know, Jack Nicholson gets bitten by a wolf. And slowly over the course of the movie, he's becoming a werewolf and eventually, presumably, a full-on wolf. And there's a sequence in the film where Jack Nicholson starts to realize his hearing is amplified, so much so that he's hearing conversations all throughout his building, and he walks into the hallway, and the way that the camera shoots him is so fascinating because we're in these kind of tight close-ups that show the ear, they show a special twitch in the ear, and how his eyes look around. And it's something. It's really something how the way Mike Nichols shoots this movie, it's so specific. It's so artfully done, as far as I'm concerned. The fact that you can get the larger story where Jack Nicholson, he's a book publishing editor, and there's some job struggles between him and James Spader, who is an up-and-comer who wants his position. There's all these sort of political society things that are going on in his life. But I'm really struck by whenever the science fiction fantasy aspects are happening and he's becoming a werewolf, there's this fantastic filmmaking to this movie. So if you've not seen the film Wolf, I highly recommend it because it gets right to business. Superhero movies need to take a note from Wolf. If you're making a superhero film, watch Wolf. If you're out there and you're in the studio system where I wish I was, where I wish I could make stuff, this is the exact kind of movie you need to watch to understand how a superhero movie should be assembled. And with pun intended. Because what's beautiful about this film, without getting too spoilery, is it starts off with the full moon, and we're looking up as trees pass. And then we go to realizing that we're not just looking up at trees passing. We're with Jack Nicholson. He's driving through the woods, through the snow, and there's a full moon, and the music is really. And this Ennio Morricone, who did the Man with No Name trilogy and The Thing, with John Carpenter's The Thing, one of the most famous composers that has ever lived. Ennio Morricone does the score for this film. And this score just kicks off with this very intense vibe, and it's a testament to Ennio's range that you can't tell that he did this and he also did The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. You can't tell. It's a radically different score. It's fantastic. But the fact that we're just kind of in the music already tells us things are afoot. The footage is telling us things are afoot. There's a full moon. There's a movie called Wolf, where if you know a man is being turned into a werewolf, these things should kind of concern you. And the music is with that mood too. And he hits a wolf on the road. And then when he goes over to check the wolf and pull it out of the road, the wolf bites him. And so right from the start, we are in what the movie's talking about. And to draw a comparison, 2003, Ang Lee's Hulk, I do have a special place in my heart for that film. But without question, the biggest mistake that movie makes is that it takes literally 30 or 40 minutes for the Hulk to come out. At the very least, the gamma ray incident should be the opening scene of the movie. Now, there is a beautiful prologue that I do enjoy, but in no way, shape, or form does that prologue set up the physical circumstances of the Hulk. So while it is amazing, and I do love that movie, that's a really discussion for another time. I find that still to this day, with these superhero movies, even though they do take the note of get to the superhero stuff sooner, there's still just this lack of understanding about establishing your character, establishing the science fiction fantasy principles, and those things have to happen in the front of your movie. You know, like Fantastic Four from 2015 egregiously takes an hour. This is Fantastic Four. This is not Jurassic Park. This is not a David Cronenberg film, and I'm very sorry to, you know, the writer director. You know, I cannot see a world where someone didn't take over your movie and try to make it different, because the Fantastic Four it's a brand. It is a brand. When you get a Campbell's soup can and you open up that can, you expect soup to come out, not a smushed up cheeseburger. So that's kind of what I'm talking about here. When you look at Wolf, I feel it does what I think Fantastic Four 2015 should have gone for, which is you got to jump to the point where the story actually starts. If the characters are to be afflicted by powers from the greater unknown and have to search for the why and how it happens, then the story must start with that affliction. Even Jurassic Park knows best to start with a dinosaur attack. So at least we know what we're getting into, even though it still takes an hour for us to get back to those dinosaur attacks. When we're introduced to other people, they are people who specialize in dinosaurs. So there's a moving motivation for everything that follows. And what's beautiful about Wolf starts off right away with the bite during a full moon. You know it's a werewolf movie, so everything is being told to you without words. And the beautiful construction of this movie from a script point of view or from an editing point of view, we start off with the wolf bite, and then there's a character scene where he wakes up at home. He has a bandage already. He's been to the doctor. But his introduction with his wife is that she's in the shower, blurry and out of focus. And Jack Nicholson he just looks like he's had a day. You know, he's had quite a day, and he's all messed up in the mirror. But this too is this too is telling us something, because every time we see him with his wife, there's this distance between them. Even when they're next to each other, you feel this distance between them. And so we have a wolf scene or a werewolf related scene. That's, you know, then seeing the doctor. Okay, that's unusual that a wolf was in this part of the area that you were, but okay. Followed by a character scene, followed by a character scene, followed by a wolf related scene where he gets a little power, followed by a character scene, followed by a wolf scene. So the fantasy science fiction elements are trudging forward. As the story takes a step, so too does the fantasy element, and they take turns with each other, and slowly over the course of the movie, these things overlap with each other. And again, this movie is so many years old, so I'm just going to be getting into spoilers, really. So if you have not seen Wolf, I highly recommend it. If you like werewolves, if you like monster stories, Wolf is one for the ages. I do think Wolf is a classic. I think it's a fantastic movie. As a fan of superheroes, I really feel like I wish more movies were made like Wolf, where you have a good story that is about something, but it also has the fantasy element, which kind of either elevates it or the story elevates that element. Either way, both things are going on. But one of the notions brought up in this movie is that as Jack Nicholson starts to realize he's turning into a wolf, or at least has the suspicion that it's happening to him when he goes to sleep, he eventually meets a doctor who studies this exact sort of situation. And it's that doctor who tells him, look, I've studied your situation, and everything you're telling me, it seems like you're turning into a wolf, a demon wolf. They avoid the word werewolf. I did see a video where they talked more about that. I couldn't find a behind the scenes featurette or anything, but this very fascinating video, I believe, made by another YouTuber, goes over everything. So I'm going to put that link below. And if I'm smart enough, I'll put one up here. But I'll definitely put a link below to that video. So if you go watch Wolf after this, or before I keep talking, please check out that video as well. It was very informative. I really loved learning more about this movie. I wanted to watch a commentary, but there's none available. So, anyway, like I said, what the movie does really well is it slowly merges the wolf and personal story. And the first time this happens is that Jack Nicholson wakes up in the middle of the night and he realizes his wife is not home, and he smells something. He just instinctually grabs something of hers, smells it, and then he just starts running through the streets, and he appears at James Spader's house. And James Spader opens the door, he runs up, James tries to grab Jack Nicholson's arm, and Jack bites him, so a bite has occurred. And when Jack Nicholson makes it to the top of the stairs, he finds his wife in James Spader's bedroom. And so here's a case where, very smartly written, the powers, the supernatural element, folds with the personal, the character element. That is what you need to do no matter what you're doing. If you're doing superheroes, if you're doing fantasy, if you're doing sci-fi, you have to have the personal element merge with the fictional element. You don't need to go Christopher Nolan style and have all these elemental themes or whatever you want to do. You don't need to do any of that. As long as you have a strong character story and the powers are relevant to that story. I'd say even the Fantastic Four movie from 2005, which you got to know that was a failure because it was a 4 on a 5. You just can't do that, man. The 4 got to show up on a 4. But we're going to do it again with the new Fantastic Four showing up in 2025. So what's that about? It better be good, man. You got Pedro Pascal. I got expectations, man. Last of Us, bro. Anyway, Mando. Even the 2005 Fantastic Four, as cheesy it is, as simple as it is, you have the main character, Reed Richards, who's one of his characteristics, one of his problems is that he's always working, he's always studying, he's always stretching himself thin, doing way too much all at once. And it's a character trait that's also represented by his power, where he's stretching, he's working himself to death, he's stretching himself thin. And that, as slim as that is for that movie, at least it's present. It's very, and on the other hand, you have Johnny, the hothead. He's losing his temper, he's pushing other people to lose their tempers. So as, again, simplistic as it may be, it's so important that the fantasy must fold with the fiction, right? It has to fold with the story. And with the themes being in mind, the theme is so important here. Where, again, the video I saw talked about how Mike Nichols wanted to do a story about a man living in sort of an upscale society, seeing how it's kind of crumbling, how society's kind of crumbling as he's changing. I don't fully wrap my head around that, but all that being aside, there's another theme presented in the movie where when Jack Nicholson meets the doctor, who explains to him for sure that he's turning into a wolf, he asks the doctor, "Is this making me a bad person? Am I a bad person? Am I just going to go out there killing people randomly?" And the doctor assures him, no. Whatever the qualities of that person are, will be the qualities of the wolf. So if you're a good man, you'll be a good wolf. And if you're a bad man, you'll be a bad wolf. And that's what we see happening. James Spader is the other guy with Jack Nicholson's wife. James Spader hustles so hard that he steals Jack Nicholson's job from underneath him. And so he's, despite everything, when we meet James Spader, he's romancing everyone. Even Jack seems to like him. They're old friends. But you see, James Spader has had some kind of envy and some desire to take from Jack Nicholson what he has, rather than earn it for himself or make it his own way. And these bad wolf qualities show up later when, after having exposed this affair, the wife tries to get back with Jack, but he's already moved on. Like I said, when they're introduced, they have all this distance. It's how they're blocked. It's how they're framed. Again, filmmakers, this is really for you. I know I've spent a lot of time in my first 100 episodes trying to make this podcast seem like it's for anybody. And that's just because I just didn't know what I was doing. You know, I was learning how to do this podcasting thing. I wanted to appeal to everybody, but I realize now, hey, first of all, I as a person do not appeal to everybody. It's just the truth. You know, if I find 20 people in a room that I like, that's like winning the lottery. I'm lucky to find one person in a room I can talk to in a room of strangers, because I'm so awkward, I'm shy. I ramble and rant a lot. But I realized, like, this show was always why it's great. The original iteration of this show, its goal was to explore what the filmmaker was doing that actually affects you as a viewer. But it's that we're looking at it through the lens of a filmmaker. How should a filmmaker be seeing these things? And I do this because I went to film school. I had a big opportunity. I have to admit, I fumbled that ball. But nonetheless, I got that opportunity, and I know it's because I always did my homework. I always did my homework. When I was an editor in college, I edited 3 shorts for other people. All of them went on to get awards. And I directed a film over 8 years ago, 007 I Only Need One. That went on to get awards. So even though not everything that get awards is necessarily great art, I've been recognized. I've made stuff that's been recognized, and my teachers have always recognized my skill and talent. And I personally feel that not so much that I'm this special little snowflake, but I feel that it's always because I'm always a student. It's always because I'm always learning. If I did anything well when I was editing for someone else's short film, or directing and editing for my own, it's because I watch movies and I'm not satisfied with just going, I like it. It's a good movie. It's so yummy, delicious, something. It's a pretty good. That's not enough for me. You know what I mean? It's not enough for me that you put Jurassic in front of World and I'm supposed to just eat it up. That's not enough for me. I need to really look at that movie. Where was the camera placed? Why was the camera placed there? What's going on with the colors? What's going on with the costumes? What's going on with the directing? What's going on with the storytelling of this movie that made me get there? That's what matters to me. And that's the lens through which I look at these movies. So when I'm talking about Wolf, that's where I'm trying to get to. And I'm trying to appeal to fellow filmmakers, and especially young filmmakers who are just kind of don't know what to look for. I implore you, do not be satisfied with a movie review as the replacement for film analysis. A movie review can only do so much. The best place to learn is to actually hear it from the filmmakers themselves. It doesn't matter if your favorite podcaster who's lived in his parents' house his whole life or writes books. If they've never made a movie, you cannot trust their opinion. It's just the truth. You cannot trust the opinion of anyone who's trying to push negative rhetoric, push societal paradigms. None of that bullshit that you hear out there has anything to do with making a movie, especially because these people do not make movies. So I've made this podcast, even though there are plenty of episodes where I am just reacting, the actress is pretty. I do make plenty of those episodes. That's why it's got reaction. But my goal, what I'm here for, is I want you to pay attention to the movie. I want you to think about what's the filmmaker thinking. Be smarter than yourself, because you have limitations. I have limitations. But if you can get what the filmmaker's thinking, you can truly be better than yourself for at least 5 seconds. I can't tell you how many times what I've learned from filmmaking has 100% applied to something I worked on. So if you're a young filmmaker and you're checking out this review, I'm here for you. I want you to be more critical about what you watch. And Wolf is such a perfect example of a film that can teach you about how filmmaking should be done, which is why I'm talking about it. So let me keep getting nerdy, because that's what I'm here to do. I haven't even brought up one of the best parts of this movie. Yeah, I said Jack Nicholson. I said James Spader. I should have said Christopher Plummer, right? Christopher Plummer, fantastic actor, been in a million movies. He plays Jack Nicholson's boss. But the most egregious thing I have not mentioned yet is that Michelle Pfeiffer is in this film. Now, I want you to remember, filmmaking, that's what we look at. That's what I'm looking at. That's what I want you to pay attention to. I want you to be a smarter viewer when you watch movies. So what did I say about Jack Nicholson and his wife? What did I say? Can you remember what I said? Blues could do, you can't do. No, okay. When we were introduced to Jack Nicholson and his wife, she's in the background. She's blurry. She's a silhouette. When we see them together, in every single scene, there's a distance between them. You feel it. You feel it. You intuit it with your brain. You intuit it with your heart. All the different parts of you that are working to absorb everything that you experience, right? So, when we take that into account, we know he's already been bitten. He discovers his wife's cheating. When we first meet Michelle Pfeiffer, Jack Nicholson has only just had a couple scenes where we're introduced to his world, and he's going out to a huge party to meet his boss, and it's already been stated he's expecting to lose his job, but he wants to talk about the situation with his boss first. And when he arrives at the party, he's still feeling funky from that wolf bite. And then he approaches, there's horses. They're at a huge estate, many well-to-do people. This is high society. They're a massive estate. And Jack Nicholson, his mere presence freaks out the horses. And horses start backing away. I think they knock someone over. And Jack, who is both affected by this, maybe instinctually weary, but also just he's in that, oh, that Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire, I've been bitten by the radioactive spider, I'm still feeling sick, you know. He's going through that werewolf sickness part of his transformation. So he just kind of wearily fades off and backs up and sort of stumbles over to a part that's a little bit away from the rest of the party, and finds himself at some little stone steps and sits down. And he looks like he's having a migraine. He's having a terrible moment, whatever's happening to him. And all of a sudden, a very slender, feminine hand reaches down very close to him and offers him a drink. And we hear Michelle Pfeiffer's voice, "Take this." And he does. And he drinks it full. And he does start to feel a little bit better. And Michelle Pfeiffer explains, "This always helps me out or my dad out when he's having a headache." She says something to that effect. But just the very fact that her introduction, her hand is like practically touching his chest. Her introduction to him is so intimate and close. And then they talk a little bit. He realizes he's standing in front of her guest home where she lives outside of his boss's estate. She's his boss's daughter. And through a little bit of conversation, at first you can tell Michelle Pfeiffer feels like he's probably just another creep that she's used to stumbling on her steps from her dad's parties. And just from this little conversation, they strike a bit of chemistry, and both of them realize that the other person is different from other people. And there's just a spiritual. It's very quick. It's captured in a look, but also captured across the conversation. These things have to be performed and written so well that you, as the viewer, don't even think about it as being dialogue written for you. When Chris Pratt or Chris Pine goes, "Oh yeah, I've just been sleeping with girls left and right," how exactly are you supposed to connect with that and feel like that's a guy who's going to hook up with someone and have a successful relationship? And what does that even have to do with anything? It's just kind of a cocky stereotype of that type of person, where typically that type of person is not announcing how many people they've slept with right away. They first want to let you know what a good person they are before you slowly start to see what a piece of crap they actually are. In this case, Jack Nicholson is playing kind of a good guy who's editor-in-chief for a long time, but he's just kind of past his prime. This is part of the reason he has been passed over in his own position. But even with the distance he has with his wife, this introduction to Michelle Pfeiffer, there's a fire there. There's a chemistry there that's so natural between the both of them. It's undeniable. And this is what I say to friends of mine who make movies and stuff. I say, if you want people to look at your work and take you seriously, your work has to be undeniable. And what that really means is scenes like this, where Jack Nicholson and Michelle Pfeiffer first meet, where their attraction to each other is undeniable. And not only that, but by the end of this first little introduction, her realizing who he is, realizing he's not such a bad guy, she immediately starts, he's a bit scuffled up, from his freak out with the horses. So she, pats his hair and pats his clothes. And this is something that I'd actually heard about watching Talkville, actually, where in the early scenes of Clark Kent meeting Lois Lane was sort of touching him up and making sure he looked okay and presentable, even though they weren't even in a relationship yet. And this is sort of what it is an indicator. Whether this would actually happen in real life right away doesn't really matter. What matters is within the movie, you need to establish the terms by which we're supposed to understand and accept these characters going where they're going. So if you have something like the distance between the wife and then the sudden but comfortable closeness of Michelle Pfeiffer's hand and voice appearing, and that by the end of this first conversation, she's already kind of looking out for him, it just indicates a lot that there's an instinctual trust. There's an instinctual connection between these two. And truth be told, I have had friends who met and got married, and there was also that instinctual connection between the two of them when they met. Sometimes it happens right there, and sometimes it happens down the line. But either way, if you're doing a movie, you have to make all of this stuff be very clear right away. Even if it's intentionally supposed to be vague, there should still be something of a hint there that makes it clear that, okay, there's something else going on between these two, and we should pay attention to that. And as you see their scenes, they always seem close to each other. You know what I mean? It's not just the filmmaking forcing you as an audience member to want them to be that way. They have a natural and easy chemistry with each other. That chemistry has to be felt through the camera. If you, as a filmmaker, don't feel that chemistry, you just think, well, the shot's right. There's two of them next to each other. They kissed. But if you do not feel that chemistry, then nothing has technically happened on screen. That's why Toby and Kirsten Dunst worked so well in that first Spider-Man film. That's very similar with all the Spider-Man films. They're just copying the magic. Well, if they date, we win, But But yeah, so I think that's something as a filmmaker you have to pay attention to that, these little hints and nods, and it's a very packed scene. It's not just one thing happening in a scene. A few episodes ago, I was bashing Acolyte, which I did not get past the first 40 minutes of. I tried a second time. I didn't get past the I don't know what act structure that's supposed to have, but it didn't exist. When you watch The Acolyte, notice that only one thing is happening per scene. Okay? You watch original Star Wars, a lot more happens per scene. Because the audience's time is limited. The story's time is limited. And you have to capture a lot within a short amount of time. Like I said, just talking about Jack Nicholson and his wife, distance, right? There's distance between them. That can be described with a couple words in the script, or it can simply be fleshed out by the director who knows where the story's going, so he's shaping it through the visual arrangements of people, their blocking, their lighting, how they're placed against each other. Do they really seem like they're together, or do they seem like they're done? That's things you do when you position people in the camera. All of that is so crucial to getting us to that intimate first interaction between Michelle Pfeiffer and Jack Nicholson, that you can so clearly tell right from the jump that these two have a connection that's real. And you need to convey that as a filmmaker, but you can't do it unless you yourself can feel it. It is a feeling. And if you can't have that feeling, maybe you haven't experienced it yourself yet. So you need to go out and get some life experiences so you can identify when the feeling actually occurs. You know what I mean? It's that what they say, what Guillermo del Toro and David Goyer, two of the most prolific filmmakers of our time right now, what they have said is that their mentors told them, you're not just a filmmaker. You're a person who makes movies for a living. So if you want to make movies that connect with the audience, you have to go out there and have experiences that you can then relay back through your film storytelling techniques. You know what I mean? And I haven't gotten to the werewolf stuff yet, but so much smart filmmaking goes into the direction of how these storytelling, how we tell the story visually, just visually. There's no line saying, oh, I feel like I'm at distance with my wife, and then the camera zooms out, making sure you know that there's an entire foot between them. You know, there's nothing stupid like that. It's just there. It is just present. Mise en scene. Everything within the frame tells the story. Everything within this frame tells you, I love Marvel movies and filmmaking, and I guess this picture of the Eiffel Tower and RoboCop's cock. Yeah. Oh, ooh. That's inappropriate. We're talking about Wolfman. Stop it. Okay. So, all that being said, all right, that's how much thought needs to go into making your movie. And we're not even talking about the werewolf shit yet. Because that stuff must work. If that stuff doesn't work, no one will care about the werewolf stuff. And now I can talk about the werewolf stuff. What's beautiful about the presentation of when Jack Nicholson becomes a werewolf is it always feels surreal. It always feels dreamlike. We always feel like we're entering another state of mind. And because as far as Jack Nicholson goes, he doesn't recall being the wolf at night. But when he wakes up, he feels refreshed. He his senses are heightened. Very early on in the movie, before he even has his hearing sequence, he passes by someone, a fellow coworker, and he tells him, geez, can you put a little less gin in your coffee or whatever it is? And the guy says, how can you tell? And he says, I can smell it a mile away. And so what we have is these subtle laying in of the character traits. The scene from Prometheus, the scene that's in the trailer. Big things have small beginnings. When you're a filmmaker, you want to tell things right. You can start off big, but it's better to start off small and then get big. So when it comes to Jack Nicholson turning into a wolf, what do we get first? First, he hits the wolf with the car. The wolf bites him. It's a full moon. If you understand what genre and what type of movie you're in, you get it. He's going to turn into that at the end of the movie. But he doesn't turn into a dog right away. The first thing we get are the powers. Smelling something, hearing something, sleeping a little too long, being in a different position than you left yourself. And then finally, when we first see him be a wolf, he's just a man. His hair is a little bit more Wolverine looking. He's a little bit animalistic, and it's in slow motion. And with each sequence, it's a little bit more dreamlike, and he looks a little bit more feral and a little bit more wolf-like. It's a progressive transformation across the movie. Even you look at Spider-Man, okay, this is always my go-to when it comes to transformation stories. You don't see Spider-Man, slam dunking right away, right? What's the first thing that you get in that movie? His hand sticks to the bus for just a second. And then he accidentally shoots a little web at the table next to him in the cafeteria at lunch. And then he catches Kirsten Dunst. And it's all very practical. It's all very real. And then we get to the big sequence of the bully trying to punch him, and he's dodging the bully. But it's a build-up. We don't just go from 0 to 60 in 5 seconds, because the audience doesn't want to see things that way. It's better for the audience to slowly get things. When we're introduced to RoboCop, it was the costume designer's idea that RoboCop not be introduced in some glorious big wide shot right away. He's introduced in pieces and parts. We see them holding his arm before it's attached to the rest of his body. We see RoboCop's point of view as he walks past the camera, as he walks past the TV monitor that shows him walking, but it's closed, it's cut off. You can't fully see him. We see him walk behind one of those funny glass windows that obscure the image. And then we just see the back of him. And then when we fully see his body, they slam a cage in front of him so that he's always in lockdown when he's not out on patrol. So the visual buildup of your character is so important when it comes to storytelling. You can start on 10, but it's better to start on 2 or 3. You know what I mean? You start small and you get there. If you understand the principles of filmmaking, you can shoot with a cell phone and capture people's hearts and minds. It does not matter what you use. And proof of that is 28 Days Later. They shot that digitally before the conversation was even needed to be had that film should never be replaced with digital. 28 Days Later, right? Rocked people's hearts and minds. It's because Danny Boyle knows where to put the camera to make you feel something. He doesn't waste your time. And if you look at Wolf, this is all really about Wolf. When you see the dream sequences and they're shot in slow motion, and where the camera is behind Jack Nicholson or looking at Jack Nicholson, it's always somewhere that gives Jack Nicholson this imposing, prowling presence. It's not a generic wide shot. It's not an awkward, ugly wide shot. It's always moving with him and is part of his experience. And when you look at the final battle sequence between Jack Nicholson and James Spader, who again, he bit at the beginning of the movie. It's James Spader who kills Jack Nicholson's wife. He's the bad wolf. Jack Nicholson hasn't killed any people who didn't have it coming. So, good wolf versus bad wolf. But when we see how they're shot, there's no generic wide shots. There's no generic intense fight choreography. When we see them fight, the way it's shot, it's a little bit slow-mo, but also it looks like two dogs fighting each other. Both the language and the choreography, it all suggests an experience that we can understand. We can understand at the very least where it's coming from. When you look at how every single scene is shot, the lens is a little closer when a power is being used. And there's little effects like Jack Nicholson's ear moving in little weird ways. The lens is always closer when something intense is happening, like when James Spader meets Michelle Pfeiffer for the first time, and you see in his eyes that he's turning into the wolf. And she asks him if he's been bitten, and at first he's kind of close, a little too close, but then he leans in and he's even creepier and closer. Why would you ask me if I was bitten? And why does he lean in? He leans in because that's the intent. That is the wolf creeping closer to his prey. Everything's happening for a reason. Nothing's happening for no reason. But if you look at the camera lens, the choices, the things are made to look good, to look professional. There is what is called the industry standard. That standard has been gone for some time now, but it's so important for us to get back to that standard. We watch Wolf. None of these frames that we see in the movie are there for no reason. Every frame, every image shot is telling the story in a certain kind of way. And you need to understand this, even if it seems to be mundane, such as Christopher Plummer and Jack Nicholson walking next to each other. There's more going on in their performance. There's more going on in the shot. There's so much more weighing in on what's happening within the scene, where when Jack is talking to his boss, although they're standing side by side, essentially this is a scene where Jack is losing. And so the boss walks out of frame and we're left with Jack feeling abandoned, which is essentially how he feels. That's why it's shot that way. Because the boss leaves the frame and now nobody's behind Jack. Nobody's got Jack's back. And Jack is left there feeling like a piece of garbage. And that's why these things are framed that way. There's something going on. And one of the beautiful things that I saw about that video is that feeling that the film tries to accomplish, which is having Jack Nicholson feel barred or trapped by his city, trapped by his civilization, which is one of the themes the director was interested in, according to this video. And this is shown when, literally, I have this movie playing right now. During one of Jack Nicholson's wolf sequences, he's staring at the window, and the way the lighting is, the wooden cuts of the window look like bars, and then it dissolves to a shot of the city and dissolves to a shot of animals behind bars. And so that sort of sense that Jack is something else trapped in this city, this urban edifice. Despite that, that imagery is representative of how he feels in his life, that he is a person trapped by the trappings of city life and expectation and society, and he just wants to get out of it. He wants to werewolf. He wants to get away from the way people operate. And there's a line that I really love that he says, where once he finds his confidence with his wolf strength and his wolf senses and his just literally this wolf nature within him, once he finds his confidence again and starts plotting to get his job back, he makes all the moves necessary, gets his assistant to help him, and he has another meeting with his boss. And in this meeting, essentially, Jack has stacked the deck. He says, if I walk, everyone who's published for me, through me, with me, is going to walk with me to another publishing house. And it's going to ruin your reputation because everyone else is going to realize that you don't run your business very well if you're doing this. And that hard sell is what makes Christopher Plummer go, okay, if I knew you were this ruthless, I never would have done this to you. And Jack says, well, I'm not done. If I'm going to get my job back, I'm also going to get a bump in my pay and additional powers. And Christopher Plummer just agrees. And it's interesting. You know, it's not like it's a huge arc. We don't get lots of detail. Jack asks his assistant to get some numbers. They get some information. He tells them to say things in a certain way. And then later on, it appears with the meeting with Christopher Plummer that those conversations have transpired, and Jack has the cards stacked in his favor. So, you know, the filmmaking and storytelling doesn't waste its time on anything we don't need to see. We don't need to see them making 15 phone calls. We just know that they do it, you know? It's not about the 15 phone calls. It's about Jack talking to his boss, securing his position as he should. And what he says to Christopher Plummer, which is my favorite line in the movie, his boss asks him, so what is it that you're bringing to the table that's so exceptional compared to the guy that you're taking the job back from? And Jack Nicholson says so confidently, I wouldn't even say arrogant, but maybe it's arrogant, but so confidently he says, well, I have individuality and taste. And if you can overlook that, then we can work anything out. And Christopher Plummer smiles. You know, I mean, he's like so impressed with Jack Nicholson's tact and his tasteful response. Everything he's doing is working. So it's just this movie just gets me on every level, because sometimes I do feel that way about myself. Like when I was in my winning days of being a filmmaker and people were recognizing me and seeing what I had to offer, I felt like that. I felt like Jack in that scene. Now it's been 8 years of life just being life, and you know, rolling with the hurdles and tumbles and all that stuff. I don't even know where I'm at, but I love that this movie starts off with Jack having the distance with his wife. He seems like kind of a more insecure person, like a good person, but an insecure person. And James Spader comes in, he's so confident and seems so friendly, all the while he's plotting against Jack. And slowly over the course of this movie, Jack, who starts off this movie kind of at a very low point, I'm losing my job, I'm losing my wife, with these little hints, Michelle Pfeiffer showing up, his wolf powers and confidence rising. When Jack changes across this movie, it's amazing to watch. Not just the special effects, which are fantastic. All of the wolf special effects sequences are amazing. Seeing his makeup and his teeth, especially in the final scene. I don't even recognize James Spader at the end of this movie when he's fully wolfed out. All of the special effects sequences deserve such praise, and I wish I could tell you the name of those people who did that, but you just gotta watch this movie to appreciate it. But all of this stuff happens with just a fantastic handling of how to tell the story. And even the scene where Jack's wife comes and tries to get him back, again, we have the huge distance between characters. And you notice there's a shared trait between the wife and James Spader, is that both of them try to appeal to Jack by saying, oh, I love you, and you're so perfect to me, and that's just not how Jack is. He, as much as he may have started out weak, he was never a crybaby and never an emotional manipulator. But that's what his wife and James Spader do. And this dramatic scene where he really rejects her with rage, but with a righteous rage. He says, you expect me to take you back just because you said your affair with a man was meaningless? That's supposed to make it better? And when we follow the wife as she exits the building, as the wife leaves frame, the camera turns and we reveal Michelle Pfeiffer there, who is listening to the whole thing. And it's after this scene where Michelle Pfeiffer confirms Jack's concern earlier with the doctor, who told him, if you're a good wolf, if you're a good man, you'll be a good wolf. If you're a bad man, you'll be a bad wolf. After the scene, Michelle Pfeiffer confirms to Jack, you're a good man. And meaning she'd already said earlier, like, so you're different from the other sleaze bags that are running around my dad. And she says, I've never met a good man who looked at me the way you look at me. And Michelle Pfeiffer is famous, especially in her early movies, of being a little bit more of a girl with an edge, with a tougher side to her. Beautiful, but tough. Willing to stick up for herself. And I think it's just a role model for a person to be. You don't have to have necessarily been a person who's been in trouble, but just be a person who's been experienced and kind of knows your own strengths and who you are. So I really like that when you have a person with that type of confidence, meet a person like Jack, who's found his own actual confidence, whereas before maybe he was a bit more charming than he truly was confident. Now he's found his true wolf spirit, his true wolf strength. And the both of these two have a shared spirit, a shared confidence in who they are and what they stand for. And it's just providence that they both met each other. It's really beautiful. And when she finds him having locked himself up into his, what's it called, the heater in his hotel room, and David Schwimmer is the cop that tries to arrest him at the zoo, but he gets away. When she finds him locked up against the radiator, and she reveals, oh, well, I've gotten out of these before. It's just, wow. But it just shows that these two are characters who live outside of whatever it is the society tells them that they're supposed to be. And they have individuality, and they have tastes, and they have values that align with each other. You know, Jack Nicholson is a sort of a man of honor, and so is she. Even though she has a history of not being so honorable, she's just kind of looking for something that she hasn't had before, and they both find it in each other. Someone with that shared perspective. It's really beautifully handled, and I love the ending of this movie. Again, the bad wolf, James Spader, tries to force himself onto Michelle Pfeiffer. That's the bad wolf. The bad wolf kills, forces himself on people, preys on the innocent and the weak. The good wolf preys on other predators, on other people that would be a threat to him or others. And that's essentially the delineation of good and evil in a very simplistic sense. But that being the case, that's one of the themes of this movie. And Michelle Pfeiffer is one of the good people. When she realizes Jack Nicholson is turning into a werewolf and thinks he killed his wife, she runs to the police. But when she gets to the police station and James Spader's there and he's clearly plotting against Jack Nicholson, she puts two and two together, go, oh, it's actually this guy. Jack is cool. I need to go back and warn Jack. She's a good person at heart. She's trying to do the right thing at all times. Even when the police show up, you know, she doesn't tell them that Jack isn't with her. They're looking for him. But she doesn't tell them that they're not with her. She tries to do the right thing. All these correct things happen, but it's not stated. No one's out there saying, oh, this is the correct thing to do. But it is the right thing to do. The right thing to do is not always the easiest thing to do, but it's the right thing to do. So I just really love the character work. Again, the special effects are amazing, and the finale is fantastic. I've always been struck by the ending of this movie when we're on Michelle Pfeiffer's eyes and have changed. And you know, there's a beautiful line in the movie from the doctor who says the good wolf, bad wolf thing. He says, sometimes you don't even have to be bitten by the wolf. Simply that the wolf spirit is in you is enough. And that's kind of Michelle Pfeiffer's case, although also Jack Nicholson and Michelle Pfeiffer did have sex, so they definitely exchanged bodily fluids with each other, which is kind of part of the AIDS thing. Again, that's something brought up by the other video. AIDS was a big fear at the time. Sort of catching diseases and viruses by blood, big fear at the time. So anyway, that being said, I really love the film Wolf. Look at the film lenses. Look at how this thing is shot. Watch a fan film. Watch a YouTuber video. How you frame, how you shoot is so crucial to actually showing your strength as a filmmaker. That's what I want you to pay attention to. If you're a young filmmaker, you have to watch Wolf and study it and understand it. Watch Lawrence of Arabia. Watch these things. Watch how people are framed. Watch how people are shot. Watch the lighting. How do the costumes change? Don't just watch movie reviews. In fact, if you want to be a great filmmaker, fuck movie reviews. Go watch commentaries. Go watch behind the scenes documentaries. Actually learn exactly what the filmmaker was thinking if you can find it. And then you'll truly know what it is that you're watching, because your opinion is just that. Like an asshole, everybody's got one, doesn't mean you're special. But if you can actually know something, if you can actually know what the filmmaker was thinking, if you can actually know cinematography principles and why the lighting is a certain way, why the camera angle is a certain way, why they use a certain lens. Again, as a director, you don't have to know exactly what lens to use every time, but you should know what the movie should look like. You should know what the standard is, the industry standard. And like I said, although it may be lowering, it doesn't mean it's not there. It doesn't mean that we don't see it when we watch a Christopher Nolan movie, Guillermo del Toro movie, when we watch a Michael Bay movie. The industry standard of cinematography, where to put the camera, who's the main character, where the lighting goes to affect your emotions, is there consistently across all of these directors. That is what real filmmaking is. It's not about your opinion. It's about the technical knowledge and skill, but also the theory of why those techniques are used. That's what affects you in the first place. So if you want to be a real filmmaker, fuck podcasts, fuck negative rhetoric. Go out there, find out what filmmakers are doing, watch great movies like Wolf, and you will be having a better edge on understanding what makes movies great and how to make your movie better than you ever could before that moment. So thank you very much for watching. Go see Wolf. Please watch it. If you've seen it before, let's watch it again. And that's what I got to say. Hats off to Mike Nichols, Jack Nicholson, Michelle Pfeiffer, James Spader, Christopher Plummer. Bo Welch, who was also the production designer on Batman Returns, is the production designer for this film. All of these things, production design, costume design, have a lot to do. It's more than just hair and makeup and special effects makeup. All of these things have to tell a story visually with how they are addressed, how they are positioned, what they do. Everything tells the story. Everything in the frame tells the story. So keep that in mind when you're making stuff and when you're studying, and you will be a better filmmaker tomorrow than you were today. Thank you very much for watching. Aloha, nerds, and catch you next time.